Greetings, brethren, and welcome to the presentation today from upa7.org, where we will address the subject of how are we going to get to Palestine, that is, the 144,000 scattered around the world. How will they ultimately be transported to the Promised Land after Ezekiel 9? This has become a controversy because of certain presentations that are claiming that chariots, or the question is, will heavenly chariots pick up the 144,000? Well, apparently some Davidians don't believe this. And they propose the idea that the 144,000 will literally march or walk into the kingdom from around the world. Is this true? Is it possible that some Davidians do not understand how metaphors are used in the Bible? As well, do some Davidians fail to understand Bible typology, the difference between a type and an antitype? Well, we want to look at these topics a little more closely to unravel this and harmonize all that's published in the Golden Bowl. So we'll begin with this text for meditation, the Book of Education, page 170. It reads, God intends that to the earnest seeker the truths of his word shall be ever unfolding. While the secret things belong unto the Lord our God, those things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children. Deuteronomy 29, verse 29. The idea that certain portions of the Bible cannot be understood has led to neglect of some of its most important truths. The fact needs to be emphasized and often repeated that the mysteries of the Bible are not such because God has sought to conceal truth, but because our own weakness or ignorance makes us incapable of comprehending or appropriating truth. All Scripture is given by inspiration of God, that we may be thoroughly furnished unto all good works. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16, 17. So this is an important subject, that we not neglect certain truths in the Bible because it doesn't fit our preconceived ideas, but we seek to harmonize all things and not make a mystery out of things that are plain enough. So we'll meditate upon this. I encourage you all to pray and search the subject out for yourself to know for certain how it is that God is going to deliver the 144,000 and bring them to Palestine. Now, this is based on a recent video that was published by a certain Rob Peralta, and he entitled this is on YouTube, Getting to the Kingdom, Chariot or Physical Travel. So by posing this question, he's implying one's right and one's wrong, and his idea is that the chariot is not true and that we will physically walk to the kingdom. Is this so? Well, how does he build his case? Well, he lays it out that there's basically two views. View one is zoomed, as he claims. This is not a term that you find in the shepherd's rod, but this is a word that he uses. The 144,000 will be zoomed over in the chariot. This is a common belief amongst at least Mountaindale and Waco associations and most Davidians. And the two references used here are 1TG11, page 13, and White House Recruiter, page 11. Now, he creates a conflict with other references. He gives 7 references over here that he claims by weight of evidence indicate that they're not going to be taken over by a chariot, but rather physical travel. And what he means by physical travel is literally walking over there or taking some kind of earthly transport, such as a bus. He says so in his video. Is this necessary, or is it perhaps that he fails to understand Bible metaphors and typology? And that is the case, and we'll demonstrate it as follows. Now, the two references that he's trying to push aside are really quite plain. This one, 1TG, volume 1, number 11, page 13, it reads, "We are therefore not to worry about a possibility of anyone's hurting the work of God. Neither are we to worry about how we're to get to Mount Zion, that is the kingdom, but we're to make sure to be ready to board the chariot of God when the angels cry out, 'All aboard!' Let us ever remember that those who once wrecked the ancient kingdom and cast out its people shall now come to build it up and cast out the horns of the Gentiles who now rule the land. So even our enemies of yesteryear, God puts working for us today. So we see here the emphasis, it's plain English, that we're not to worry about how to get to Zion, but to be ready and board the chariot of God. I mean, that's as plain as day. This is not boarding a bus or plane or walking halfway around the world, but this is plain as statement. So why is it that some people would not believe this when it's fairly straightforward? Or this statement that supports that, White House Recruiter, page 11, it reads, "And if the flying saucers are indeed the Lord's, then what else are they to come for but to deliver everyone whose name is found written in the book," Daniel 12:1, "and to slay those who oppress them," Isaiah 66, verse 16. "Or if perchance none of heavens are yet come, still nothing is more certain, that the day hasteneth greatly when they will come. What is of first and supreme importance to each, however, is to know for a surety that his name is written in the book. To have this most blessed assurance, one must first know what will keep one's name out of the book and what will put it in." So here we're seeing this plain reference to a flying saucer, which is a supernatural transport. And if we want to be certain to make it to God's kingdom, then we have to, and keep our names written in the book, then we have to believe that this is the means by which God will take us from wherever we are scattered around the world to where he wants us to be in the Mount Zion. So why would anybody not believe this? It's strange. Well, this is a slide from Peralta's presentation where he's trying to make the case for evidence for physical travel. And so here are two references and then his comment. So the first one, 1TG, number 31, page 6 and 7, it reads, "In the days of Moses, the Lord smote but one stream, the Red Sea." And this is commenting on Isaiah 11, verse 15. "And one nation, Egypt." That's the type. "But now the Lord promises to smite every stream, all seven, and causes people from the four corners of the earth to reach their land without so much as getting their feet wet. Although today, as in Moses' day, such a thing seems utterly impossible, yet it is certain that just as God made it possible then, he will now too. The battle is the Lord, and the will is ours. We have nothing to do but to obey his voice. That is our only duty, brother, sister." So this idea that he highlights that the people are not even going to get their feet wet implies that they're going to literally walk over dry land. Well, it's also possible that if you get on a chariot, that your feet won't get wet either. Have we thought about that? And then this reference from 1TG number 37, page 16. He's commenting on Isaiah 51, verse 11. It says, "Therefore the redeemed of the Lord shall return and come with singing unto Zion, and everlasting joy shall be upon their head. They shall obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and mourning shall flee away." Then Brother Haddoff comments, "Thanks be to God that he is not only to awaken his people and to cause them to sing while marching into Zion, but he's also able to remove their sorrows and their mourning forever. He is well able to put everlasting joy upon their heads." So Peralta thinks because marching to Zion means that we're literally going to walk there. That's not what the Brother Haddoff is saying. It's a song that they will be singing, marching to Zion. And now here's the key. Peralta is noting, he asks this rhetorical question, why would the Lord smite seven streams, every stream of the world, if his people would not walk over them into the kingdom? That's an assumption. Okay? Peralta does not understand the use of a Bible metaphor. This is the problem. He's taking it all ultra literal. So let us explain the Bible's use of metaphors. This is very important. A metaphor is a literary device that uses an implied comparison between two unlike things to help explain or expound upon an idea. The Bible uses multiple literary devices as a work of literature comprised of many genres, from poetry to history to epistles, it's important to recognize when a statement in the Bible is meant to be taken literally and when it is not, so we don't fall into strange or faulty assumptions. So this is exactly what Peralta's doing. He's taking statements literally when they're not. And when you do so, you fall into strange ideas or faulty assumptions. So let's look at some examples, just so for educational purposes, to understand how metaphors are used. The Bible's full of them, Old and New Testament. The Bible uses metaphor to help us make connections that allow us to understand deeper truths. Jesus often used metaphors to make statements about himself, as in the examples below. Jesus said, "I am the bread of life," John 6:35. This confused some people. The Jews then disputed among themselves, saying, "How can this man give us his flesh to eat?" John 6, verse 52. But Jesus did not actually mean he was a loaf of bread, or they were actually to eat his flesh. Instead, he meant that he gives life and sustains us spiritually in the same way that bread sustains the body. So you can see there's similarities, but they're not identical. We can't take this literally. Here's another one. "I am the light of the world," John 8, verse 12. Jesus did not mean he literally gave light to the world like the sun. Instead, he pointed to his role of driving back spiritual darkness and illuminating the way of life and truth. So this is essential to understand a method that Jesus used to teach the people, is using metaphors. And this is common throughout the Old and New Testament. So let's get back to the second Exodus. This is a statement in 2TG, volume of Timely Greetings, volume 2, number 31, page 8. This is a reference that Peralta did not use, but this is quoting the scripture, Isaiah 11, verse 15. It reads, "The Lord shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea, and with his mighty wind shall he shake his hand over the river, and shall smite it in the seven streams, and make men to go over dryshod." This is clearly a metaphor. And Brother Houteff comments, he said, "Yes, the Lord will open the way for the gathering of his people. The Exodus of today, therefore, shall be as the Exodus of yesterday, only on a greater scale." And then he states, "God's people in these last days shall be gathered from every land, not from the land of Egypt." So Brother Houteff is clearly conveying that he understood the typology, that the type is similar, the Exodus and type is similar, but the antitype is clearly different. In the type, they gathered from one place, the land of Egypt, whereas in the antitype, they're going to be gathered worldwide, from every land. So the idea that God's hand shall smite the seven streams is clearly a metaphor, not to be taken literally. And that men shall go over dryshod is also metaphorical. Then Peralta goes to this reference in 2TG 46, page 36 and 37. Watch carefully. It reads, "Do we see then, as plain as we should, that to fail to heed the truth of this most momentous event in all church history is to forfeit the gift of miracles, fitness for translation, and the right to live and reign with Christ during 1,000 years? We dare not let the enemy cheat us of this new heart fitness for heaven. This ingathering is indeed to be the second Exodus, and is to be exactly as the Lord has said, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea, like as it was to Israel in the day that he came up out of the land of Egypt," quoting Isaiah 11, verses 11 and 16. So he's showing this that there's a second Exodus that's comparable to the first. But look what Peralta notes. This is Peralta's note, not Brother Houteff. Peralta claims that the type shows that he's to recover his people by leading them physically into the land, quote, exactly as he did in the first Exodus. Excuse me, but that's not what Brother Haddo's saying. He said exactly as the Lord has said, pointing to type-antitype. And then Peralta claims no zooming in the type. I guess this is the word he uses, zooming. No chariots in type. Well, duh, because the type is different than the antitype. And Peralta doesn't understand this. This is his fatal flaw. So let us look at typology. What is a type? Here's some examples or definitions. By way of example, this is Revised Version, or by way of figure, it's in the margin of the Revised Version. In this source, but these things occurred to them typically. The emphatic diglot. In the Weymouth, it says all that kept happening to them was with a figurative meaning. So a type is a figure. So a type is defined as a figure, an emblem, or a symbol or a figure of something to come, a pattern. And a figure is defined as to prefigure or foreshadow or represent by typical or figurative resemblance, a pattern, emblem, type, image, or imitation. So those are the dictionary type definitions, but let's look at some examples. So understanding typology is critical to understanding parts of the rod. For example, the issue of keeping feast days. There are many people, Seventh-day Adventists and even Davidians, strangely enough, that are literally arguing that we have to keep the feasts today in literal form, like the Passover once a year in the spring. But what they fail to understand is that we keep the feast today only in antitype. That's what the rod tells us. So typology is crucial. So let's read this. A type is a literal representation of a spiritual fact. Baptism, for example, is called a figure of the resurrection, 1 Peter 3:21. The first Adam, the figure of him who was to come, that is, the second Adam, Christ, Romans 5, verse 14. In Adam we have a type of him whose coming was still future. This is in Weymouth. The earthly sanctuary and its services and priesthood are said to be a figure of the heavenly sanctuary and the ministration of Christ. Hebrews 9, verses 8, 9, and 24. However, a type, this is critical, pay attention here, a type and antitype are never identical, but only similar. In fact, there must be differences in many respects. As there must be a similarity or analogy between the type and antitype, so there is also a diversity or dissimilitude between them. It is not in the nature of types and antitypes that they should agree in all things, else, instead of similitude, there would be identity. Hence, the apostle, while making Adam a type for Christ, yet shows how differently the latter excelled the former, 1 Corinthians 15:47. So, the priests of old were types of Christ, though he infinitively excelled them. And this comes from Popular and Critical Bible Encyclopedia under the article entitled Type. So I really suggest that you study typology and examples further before you make claims that the type is the same as the antitype. They are not. Otherwise, they would be identical. So there has to be similarities, but not identical. And this is where Peralta fails miserably. So we get back to this reference, the second Exodus, Isaiah 11:15. We read this earlier. The Lord shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea, and with his mighty wind shall he shake his hand over the river, and shall smite it in the seven streams, and make men go over dryshod. And then Brother Haddow comments, yes, the Lord will open the way for the gathering of his people. The Exodus of the day, that is the antitype, therefore shall be as, that is similar, but not identical, as the Exodus of yesterday, only on a greater scale. God's people in these last days shall be gathered from every land, not from the land of Egypt. So Brother Haddow's comment clearly reveals that he understood the difference between type and antitype. And this scripture is metaphorical. It's not to be taken literally. That's Peralta's mistake. So let's look at examples. The Exodus, type and antitype. The first Exodus, God literally delivers Israel, about 6 million people, from the literal country of Egypt, a small geographic location on the earth. Moses led Israel literally through the Red Sea on foot, no question about it, over dryshod. And furthermore, Israel's enemies were literally buried under a wall of seawater. So when we get to the second Exodus, do we expect all this to be literally the same? The answer is absolutely not. It can't be. In the antitype, God will deliver 144,000 scattered around the world from antitypical Egypt, which we all know from the study of Zechariah chapter 6, is that Egypt is a symbol of the world. In the type, it was a literal geographic location. In the antitype, it's a symbol of the whole world. Very important difference. Next, God will gather antitypical Israel via heavenly chariots. They will not literally walk from around the world. This is absolute nonsense. That people are in islands of the South Pacific, or maybe there's some on the island of Hawaii. How are they going to get over to the Promised Land? Peralta is suggesting that God will open up the Pacific Ocean and these people will literally walk over there. Is this true? Have you looked under the sea? The Marianas Trench is even deeper underground than the Mount Everest and the Himalayas above ground. How are the people going to navigate this, men, women, and children? It's patently absurd. It's much more logical and consistent that they will get on heavenly chariots and be taken over there safely without getting their feet wet. And furthermore, the tares will be slaughtered by heavenly angels with slaughter weapons. So you see similarities, but clearly distinct differences. So let us not be novice teachers, as the Bible warns us about in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 2 to 6. A bishop must then be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach the truth, not falsehood. 3, not given to wine, nor striker, nor greedy of filthy lucre, but patient, not a brawler, not covetous. 4, one that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. Verse 5, for if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? And 6, not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride he fall into combination of the devil. Peralta is revealing himself as a novice because he doesn't understand Bible metaphors and typology, and really is exposing himself as a lesser cattle. This statement from tract 6, page 40, commenting on Isaiah chapter 7, verse 25. The terms treading and lesser cattle have two meanings. Treading meaning both to step along and to trample something beneath the feet. Lesser cattle means both younger cattle and inferior cattle. Therefore, the phrase for the treading of lesser cattle, taken in the light of the first meaning, respectively, of each of the two terms, must refer to the children and those who newly come into the truth, who may be staying or treading about the newly digged hills. Taken in the light of the second meaning, this applies to Peralta, of each term, it must refer to pressing or trampling, treading to the ground, all of the unconverted who may seek to come into the vineyard. Of this latter class, Zacharias says, and it shall come to pass that when any shall yet prophesy, then his father and his mother that begat him shall say unto him, Thou shalt not live, for thou speakest lies in the name of the Lord. And his father and his mother that begat him shall thrust him through when he prophesieth. Zechariah 13:3. So Peralta is claiming that God will not deliver the 144,000 through chariots, but that will literally walk there. He's prophesying falsehood. And this is the work of the lesser cattle, to create confusion and division and try to confuse naive and unread Davidians. So what can we summarize here? Rob Peralta's argument that chariots will not be used to, quote, zoom, this is his term, saints to the kingdom, is based on faulty logic and his failure to understand Bible metaphors and typology. Peralta fails to harmonize two important inspired statements, that is 1TG 11, page 13, and White House Recruiter, page 11, about the use of heavenly chariots to transport people, and instead inserts his own limited understanding and thus private opinion. Peralta makes a fatal assumption that the second Exodus must be identical to the first in terms of how God's people will be taken to the kingdom. This is simply not the case. By publicly promoting his own views on the topic, i.e. publishing a YouTube video, and several others contrary to the teaching of the original Shepherd's Rod message, Peralta exposes himself as a teacher of falsehood and an anotypical prophet of Baal. Now, this isn't the first time he's been teaching outside the rod. Other examples contrary to the rod that we published on prior, and if you look in the link in the description box below, you can see these videos. For example, the Confederacy in Isaiah 8, he argues that it's only military service and has nothing to do with incorporation with the state as IRS 501c3. He's dead wrong. We've exposed him on this. 2, he believes that there's a seventh tube that takes oil into the golden bowl in Zechariah chapter 4, and he makes up the seventh tube as a hallucination, a mirage, based on the idea of coming from Brian Albert Graham. So we've exposed this mirage. Furthermore, he doesn't believe in multiple publishing houses around the world to reach 70 Adventists. His argument that he defends only Mount Dale Waco is the only two legitimate storehouses to supply the world field of 22 million 70 Adventists with the rod literature. And this is utterly, patently false. We've exposed that. So he openly fights the idea of brethren establishing their own publishing work in countries around the world. And furthermore, we'll expose this one soon, he recently produced a video where he believes that the King of the North today in 2022 is only Great Britain. And we will expose that one very soon. So this is a tragedy, but because of his pride and insistence in teaching his own views contrary to the rod, he is now a teacher of falsehood. So if you'd like more information, questions, comments, or like to get a requested outline of the study as a PDF, or obtain a print copy literature of the original rod literature that gives details on this or many other topics, or to learn, most importantly, how to print your own rod literature in your part of the vineyard, then please don't hesitate to contact us anytime in the U.S. Our email, upa5453@gmail.com. Our phone, you can text us or contact us using WhatsApp or one of our websites, yparish.org. We also have representatives in South Africa. There's their email, their phone number, and their website, upa7.co.za. And we have representatives in Zimbabwe. There's their email and a number that you can text or connect with them via WhatsApp. So we thank you all, brethren, for your time. May you seek for truth as for hidden treasure, and to CC from this man whose breath is in his nostrils. Godspeed.